Hey guys, Pete here. Today I'm going to make a video about some of the interesting things that either I missed or I failed to mention in my Twin Peaks Season 3 Episode 5 recap and review. It does contain spoilers for everything up until that episode, Part 5, so if you haven't watched that far yet, you'll want to stop watching now. Okay, so the first thing that is probably the most reported and something I missed completely whenever I watched the episode was that this guy Richard, who's the bad boy in the roadhouse smoking at the non-smoking table, is credited as Richard Horne in the credits. Now, I think what's most significant about this, as far as what we actually know, is that this is a show that has played around with the credits in the past, so the fact that they put it there is sort of a clue as to who this guy is. Now, what that means is definitely open to interpretation, as there are several Hornes who he could be related to directly, as in his parents. The first two that are the most obvious, but not necessarily the correct choices, are Ben and Jerry Horne. They're males, so their children would have the Horne last name in most cases, unless it was like Ben fathering Donna Hayward. It could be either of these guys. Ben sleeps with just about everybody in the original run and makes no bones about it, so he could certainly have popped out another kid. Jerry is not known to be with anyone or was never really, had a female character in his storyline, so that's a possibility as well. And then we also have Johnny, who is Audrey's brother, who, was working with Dr. Jacoby in the original series. He was kind of insane, wore the Indian headdress and whatnot. But we know that he's not coming back, or at least the actor who's played him isn't. So that makes him a little less likely to be the father, but really don't know. I mean, the kid seems to have some problems, so he could be related to that. It could be related to that. His father was kind of a nut job. And then there's Audrey. Audrey could have had a child, and this brings up the most theories, and not all of them are pleasant, honestly. I guess the big strike against this theory is that his last name is Horne, so that would mean that Audrey wasn't married. Now, some people had this idea that maybe she had a child with Agent Cooper before he left town, which would have been, Evil Coop that we know now. And that's definitely possible, but there's a couple things that work against it. We know that Agent Cooper didn't stay in Twin Peaks that long. We don't know for sure how long, but basically after we saw him come back and be inhabited by Bob, he didn't really do a lot. The other thing is that Audrey was in a major explosion in that same time, right? So she was in the hospital, and honestly, one of the biggest things about her was people thought she might still be in a coma 25 years later. So we know she's alive, we know she lived through the blast, but we don't know about her state other than it was really bad whenever that happened. So I was reading something today, and, the guy said, well, maybe Evil Coop went and impregnated her in the hospital while she was in the coma, which is kind of creepy, but it's also not beyond the scope. So yeah, Richard Horne, we'll find out more about him in the upcoming episodes. The next thing was the music. You might have noticed that the music was missing when you heard it in a couple select scenes this time around. And I'm not going to go into all of that, but it's something that I read an article about in relation to season 4, because we all noticed that whenever Laura's theme played when Bobby was crying after seeing the picture, music was a big part of the original run, and it's very sparse now. So the author of that article said maybe the fact that it's creeping back in is a sign that things are going back towards where they used to be. So it's just something to keep in mind. Next episode when it comes out, listen to when the music comes up and tell me what you think. Next we have these balloons. There's red balloons that we see when Dougie Coop is going into work. They're on this little structure behind the statue, the law enforcement or cowboy statue, however you depend to look at it. When he goes in, there's a lot of balloons. When he comes out, there's only one. That might not be anything, but it was brought up that the drugged out mother, who's across the street from Dougie's car, has a balloon in her scenes as well. Now, it was originally brought up in comments to me that maybe she had gone to Sonny Jim's birthday party, which I didn't think was likely since, Sonny Jim and the real Dougie live in a different neighborhood than where she's located. And she doesn't look like she goes that far for home, except maybe to cop drugs. But it came up again that this balloon looks a lot like the balloons on this structure. And what that means, I don't really know, but you guys tell me what you think. The fingerprints on the screen when Tammy Preston is looking over the case file for Agent Cooper. A lot of people pulled this up and looked at it more closely, and it looks like that the one that she has zoomed in on here is a mirror image of the other on, the real Cooper's prints. So there's a lot of different things going on in this image, like the writing is backwards on one but not the other. So I'm not going to get into any of that. But the general consensus is that this is something that Tammy has noticed, and she's trying to figure out how it's possible that their prints would be reversed, right? So she knows it's a counterfeit Agent Cooper, but why does this guy have mirror image prints of the original? Mr. Strawberry. Whenever Evil Coop brings up the name Mr. Strawberry, the warden is definitely put off. Like, he has like an unsettled look, and then he puts his hand up against his mouth. And, when you go back and watch it again, it's really obvious that this is happening and that it's related to what Cooper just said, right? Evil Coop just said. So there's plenty of theories going around about this one, about maybe, that's a code word for something that he's used for illegal dealings or someone that he knows. And Evil Coop's basically telling him that name in that context so to scare the shit out of him, basically. The band that played at the end, they're named Trouble, and another credits thing was that David Lynch's son is the guitar player of the band. You can see his name right there. That's kind of an interesting thing. For me, when I was watching, I was like, man, this band, I didn't know who they were, obviously, but I was like, they're definitely a band that was made to be in a David Lynch movie. I was thinking of Link Ray and some other stuff, and it's pretty cool that it's actually his son that's in the band. Then there's this Sonny Jim blink backwards theory, and people who are behind it really make a good case that he blinks backwards. It's hard to tell for me. I did watch the slowed down and reversed versions, and yeah, it looks like when you turn it around, it looks like a forward blink. But it didn't jump out to me at the time, probably because I was thinking about the fact that Dougie Coop had shed a tear. So yeah, this is like a rabbit hole because a lot of people are tying a lot of things into this, and then they're bringing up the idea that perhaps Denise was walking backwards. I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole right now, but it's something to keep in mind. If you see something that looks weird, maybe it's being played in reverse. The deputy and the drugs. Someone pointed out that the guy in the bar who takes the Morley pack from Richard Horne was in fact the deputy that we saw that was kind of skeptical and making fun of the log lady. And it's Deputy Chet, or I called him Chet. His name's actually Chad. It was the way that Frank Truman said it. So yeah, Deputy Chad, if you put these two pictures together, he's obviously into some shady stuff with something that I'm sure is going to come out later. Then we have these screens during the alarm bells. We have two different screens that clearly come up over security monitors. One looks like somebody working in a machine shop. I don't know exactly what they're doing. And the other is a cooking show where three people are standing behind a table and there's a bowl of something red there. And yeah, I don't know what that is either. But it is something that's peculiar. I mean, he took control of the security system, and then these two particular shots were put in there as something. What that is, I don't really know. And the last thing is when we looked at the BlackBerry and we looked at the woman in the beginning who was using using it to reach out to the communication device, or at least that's what we thought was going down. She writes Argent 2, and I was wondering, because Argent is a word that I've heard the word, I don't know what it means. I've heard it, I think, as a name rather than anything in particular. But then I was thinking about it after the fact, and the device was in Argentina, where we last saw Philip Jeffries. So she types Argent 2 in, and maybe Argent is related to the word Argentina. One last thing, I guess maybe the Argent and this will be a half thing, because I'm going to call the video 10 Things You Might Have Missed. But on the house where the drugged out mother lives, we see this symbol on the front. And it kind of, to me, at first I thought of crosses, but then when I thought about how it's laid out, it kind of reminds me of an old TV aerial, like, the antennas on top of the house. None of the other houses in the neighborhood have anything like it. From any of this, I went back and looked at the different shots, and you don't see it. And yeah, so what do you guys think it means? I am getting ready to start working on my Q&A for this episode, which will come out the day after this one you're watching right now. So if you have any more questions, post them in the comments of the episode 5 recap and review, or here, and then I'll pick out a bunch of them and see what we can find out. Please subscribe. Go back and check out my other videos if you haven't seen them yet. And thanks for watching. I'll talk to you soon.